Let's talk about, let's just, before I guide the conversation, let's just give you all some time to weigh in on what I wrote. The people in the chat room or those watching may not be aware. I don't even remember when I wrote it. It's got to be a week ago at this point because every day is just a blur. Um, I wrote a blog post regarding diversity in genealogy and family history research. And yes, Miss Shelley mentioned Houston, we have a problem, as she tweeted it. And it's gotten comments from all over the place. I would say 95% has been in support of what I talked about in the blog post. I will definitely share the link in the chat for people to access it. But until I get my guiding questions together, I'd just like for you all to have a little banter regarding your initial reactions, whatever else, to what I wrote.
I can say something.
Okay.
To kick it off. It came from a posting from Shannon and Shannon Christmas. And there's a lot of us that do a lot of submittals to different various genealogy organizations. And we typically do not get selected, or it's very rare that we get selected. And so that's a concern that we all share. And I think Nika's article eloquently shared feelings and shared information that a lot of people probably weren't even aware of. And there's a few of us that are very connected in the genealogy world. We go to a lot of conferences, we're members of various different groups and things. So I compliment Shannon, number one, to share the information. I'm talking about Shannon Christmas, which is on Facebook, shared that he had submitted 5 proposals to present at the National Genealogical Society Conference. And, I didn't post. I submitted 4. They all 4 were rejected. His 5 were rejected. So it was time to have that dialogue to see, is there something going on? And the research that Nika had done even brought out even more. So we're thinking, oh, wow, is there some little pattern? So, to be fair to everybody, for those of us that like to teach and present, we also like to have the opportunity to do it on the national stage. Some of us do, some of us don't, but the opportunity should be available to us. So I commend Nika on the article, like what she wrote. I like the feedback we're seeing. And it was the first time I think Shannon had experienced that, where there's several of us that had been basically bumped a little bit upside the head a little bit, that, not being rejected over the last few years. And so I just want to thank Shannon and Nika for bringing this forth, because there's a lot of conversation about it, but we hadn't taken it anywhere. Yeah. So I'll let Angela go next. She's raising her hand.
Yeah. For me, because I had not submitted to speak this year at NGS, and I was a bit startled or stunned by the information that came forth, only because this information came forth for me 4 years ago, 2012. Mm-hmm. And some will remember, you will remember, Shelley, I think you were there. Several of us, I remember we were at a conference, in fact, in St. Louis. Yes. Coming down to breakfast, someone just said, oh, Angela, did you submit to speak at this conference coming up? And I said, yes, I did. I submitted 4 proposals, and they were all rejected. And there were these sort of looks of recognition among the others who were at the table. And then 3 people in a row. Yes, I did too. Yes, I did too. And the third person, yes, so did I. All had been rejected. Well, and then someone mentioned another person, extremely well known, had submitted 7 that year, had been rejected. All of us are people of color. What became evident, because that was 2012, but that was my 3rd consecutive year in a row to submit. And for me, I said, okay, I guess I get the message. It's taken me 3 years to get the message. Mm-hmm. Clearly, that is not a venue where any proposals that I submit will be welcomed. And so I removed myself from submitting. So I had not submitted since that time. But I guess my hope was that it had changed. And so there was a surprise on my part to hear this again. You had then said, oh, yes, I submitted 4 or 5 or whatever. And then others began to write to several of us. And I'm sitting here 4 years later because I've put my energies into some new endeavors and that have been very good, very healthy. But the fact that something was going on, thankfully, the response has been very, very positive, I think, from the public in the sense that people are saying, hey, what is going on? I know that there was a little bit of an effort to maintain the status quo. Hey, keep submitting. It's okay. But no, it's really not okay. And that is a concern that 4 years later, I'm hearing this is happening to colleagues whom I respect, whom I admire, from whom I learn so much, and from whom I know others can learn so much. Yet they are being denied that opportunity to speak. That for me was when I realized, oh my gosh, this is ongoing, and that message, oh, keep putting your hat in the ring, it'll someday be picked, made me concerned about process. And I often refer to process in a lot of things, but that really became something that did concern me. And it's one of those things that I think deserves review, fair review. And of course, I'm not on the selection committee, but I know, in fact, another person in the Midwest had said, oh, yes, I applied too, but I'll address this in a few days because they were involved with some other activities. But wow, it's, there are many people. And of course, there are people, I'm sure they're going to have someone to speak who's very talented, and it does not put down anyone else who is selected. But the process, it has been suggested, well, submit, it says you can submit up to 7. Well, I thought 4 was acceptable when I was applying 4 years ago. But maybe it should be apply for the maximum. You might get 2 selected, but that's not known by many. And, it's one of those things that it deserves discussion and review. And I'll just leave it at that.
Okay. One of the things that I will say is that initially what drew me to write the blog post was talking about speaking engagements. But this is actually much larger than just speaking engagements. This is just across the board. This is a topic that even after I wrote this blog post, I realized I had written about similar issues from a different vantage point, even last year, 2 years, 3 years ago. And perhaps, folks, weren't following my blog or whatever at that particular point in time. But a lot of these issues were interconnecting with each other. And we definitely have had some folks who have kind of saw what we wrote, and they then took it upon themselves to try to provide reasons and not necessarily reasons, but ways that societies and genealogists can actually become more inclusive, to the whole effort. And we definitely need that, especially from our allies of, who are not people of color. We definitely need those words and posts and tweets and comments and stuff shared. But I'm going to refocus the conversation just a little bit. Because I want this to just talk about people of color in the world of genealogy, period. Yes, we're talking about presentations, but we're also talking about a representation in a number of different areas. And so the first question I actually have for the panel is, have people of color genealogists and historians been marginalized due to being in the shadow of Alex Haley? Now, you're probably wondering why I would ask this question. You have to understand that Roots was a huge success. It galvanized people of not only just people of color, but it galvanized people of different races to be interested in their family history, because the task that he seemed to take up seemed impossible to conquer. And he seemed as though he was able to do that. And by the very nature of that, everyone is in a sense tried to emulate what Alex Haley has done. They want to believe that it's possible for their own families. His work has been widely criticized by a number of noted genealogists and family historians, who shall remain nameless. I won't throw them under the bus, at least not tonight, perhaps, but his work has been criticized, considered not scholarly. I mean, I could just, throw everything but the kitchen sink at it. But do you think that we as people of color, when it comes to genealogy, family history research, that we potentially are not taken as seriously when it comes to our scholasticness with regard to genealogy, our scientific nature with genealogy, our validity in terms of a whole field existing? Do you think that? Do you think because he was such a success that people don't take us seriously now because he's been challenged, and it doesn't appear as though rebuttal was ever issued for that?
Can I speak on that real quickly? I'm still kind of new to like all the conferences and things. I can probably count on my fingers how many I've attended, and I've only spoken at one thus far myself. But I would say I think that there is part of that, what you're saying about being in the shadow of Alex Haley, but I also think that there's a perception by people who are not of African descent specifically, that our genealogy or our techniques or whatever don't apply to them. And by proxy, people who are of African descent or who are of color, when they are doing presentations, even if it has nothing to do with ethnic specific topics, the perception is, oh, black person talking must be about black people, or it's not going to apply to me, and in fact, I think that that's ridiculous. But I do think that there's a certain school of thought out there that is like that, and I've seen it even in my short time kind of attending some of these conferences and whatnot. And I think it's sad. I think it's sad, and as you and I had talked about, privately the other day, because part of African American genealogy is really is sifting through the missing pages of a bigger family story that is America. Okay, so many of us, even here on BlackProGen Live, have talked about ancestors who had parents who were Caucasian and slave owners and different things of that nature. And when you're in a conference setting, you might be in the room with a cousin who's published a book or did presentations on their whole family tree, but then here you come with your story, and you just demolish, or you add on to, really it should be you add on to their story, but because they have a certain package story already set, think about what people were saying about the Sally Hemings story, 40, 50 years ago. And where we're at now with that, just about 2 or 3 weeks ago, the National Park Service recognized George Washington's family tree as being multiracial, but people have been saying that, and I can tell you, I'm one of them here in the Washington, D.C. area. People have been saying that for years, but now the National Park Service recognized it less than a month ago. So, I think it's part of that is that they have a myth themselves that they're holding on to that they're kind of scared also. So yeah.
Okay. Anyone else want to weigh in? Do you think that we adversely suffer from people not taking the whole field seriously? They don't weigh African American genealogy on this as the same weight as maybe Dutch genealogy or some other genre, so to speak.
I like a clarification. Do you mean the field itself, or do you mean the individuals who are the practitioners?
I say the field, because if the people who are considered the experts appear to have, I don't want to call it a disdain, but they don't look very highly on the field of African American genealogy, then that's going to reverberate down.
Well, I don't know if that's there. I think that there may be those who are practitioners, those who are professionals, those who are writers, speakers, researchers, who may be considered less than in terms of being capable of telling the story, because there are people who are certainly individuals who specialize and who have had much success and who have gotten accolades for having been successful. I don't think it is necessarily the field itself, although there are the apologists who want to say, oh, well, it's all made up. It's all made up. This didn't really happen. And of course, we'll hear the political pundits saying, well, they were well fed and well clothed. We hear that sort of passive aggressive banter coming from political pundits who suddenly, even in light of a new museum being opened, they're going to apologize. Well, they weren't treated that badly. So, why are you researching this? This wasn't quite the way it was. We know that Alex Haley didn't do A, B, or C. But from inside the community, from inside the genealogy community, there are individuals I know who are practitioners and who have been quite successful. I think the challenge is to perhaps at least make it clear that there are individuals of color who are engaging in the same field, going down the same road, who have skills, who have credentials, who have certainly intelligence to present the story, which is also their story, to present it well, to present it thoroughly, and to present it accurately. I think for me, from what I can see, and looking at the number of people of talent who've not been given that opportunity to share their talent, I think it's more towards individuals who are researchers of color not being taken that seriously. But I don't know, maybe someone else may have a different perspective there.
Do you think that it's because people of color, they don't feel we have the same training and skills that they have? And I say that in relationship to real estate. And we had an organization in Tallahassee that was African American Realtors, and there was 30 of us. We got the same license as anybody else, went to the same schools as anybody else, but even within the Black clients would come to the Black Realtors to show all the houses, but when it came time to write the contract, they went to a white realtor. And we spent time for years to educate that, wait a minute, we got the same license. We went to the same school. We have the same knowledge and skills, just as the other realtors. It equates the same way, I think, in the genealogy field. I research African American, and I'm being labeled as an African American researcher. I pride myself on that, but I also do Great Britain, France, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, which is still all part of the family. So people that view, and I think it is a myth, because I am amongst people that are very talented and very skilled, and I think it's a myth that they also don't attend Black sessions because they think it doesn't apply to them, because it's just about Black research. Well, you know what? There's too many shades of us, too many of us, and we are all related. We are knocking those doors down day after day after day. Getting to 1870 is the biggest myth that somebody put out there, that you can't go past that. So it's happening every day. DNA came in and is telling a whole nother story that is not lying. So wake up, America, and be able to appreciate each other, because who you not attending or selecting is probably your cousin.
Come on now. Snap,
I mean,
snap, 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 snap.
Seriously, and that's what they're finding.
Hold on, because Jen came in the chat room.
I'm sorry.
Jen came in the chat room and just she edges are on the floor with this comment. I'm just gonna share what she said because it's really true. She says she thinks that it's bigger. How many of the major genealogy companies and white genealogists tweeted or promoted the new museum in DC?
I only saw
Why
two.
wouldn't more genealogists be excited about a new museum?
Yeah, I saw 3.
And
And
the new
maybe,
Smithsonian Museum.
and it's the new
Okay.
Smithsonian, so it's not
Yes.
like this is, you know,
A
private
Black museum,
library, you
right.
know, this is on the National Mall, a block from the White House,
Yes.
right? This is something that our tax dollars are funding.
Right down to
No,
the
government,
DAR.
private
that the,
money.
yeah,
Private money.
well,
Your tax dollars didn't pay for it. And that should
None.
be emphasized for the pundits who are going to say, look what our tax dollars. This is
No, private money,
private.
okay.
donations.
Regardless, it's for the public.
Yes. Absolutely.
Okay. You don't even have to pay for a ticket.
Right.
The tickets are free.
Free. Yes.
Right. So this is a service that is provided to the whole,
Yeah.
anybody can go, anybody can walk in. Now, granted, the tickets are, I mean, it's hard to get one now, but even still, I think she does raise an important point is, you know, when new record sets come out, right? New York Public Library digitizes their city directories. I don't have anybody in my family who's in New York. It doesn't matter. I'm going to share that resource.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to tweet that out. I'm going to say, hey, awesome job, New York Public Library. But why is it that people of color don't get the same type of, I guess, I don't know what you would say. I don't want to even call it a shout out, but why should it even make a difference? Yeah, I just wonder. I'm definitely gonna, I'm gonna share a stat with everyone who's watching, because it's a tad bit disturbing. And this is a number that I came up with after I posted my blog post because of the number of people that I had reach out to me. 1 in 35 proposals that were submitted for the National Genealogical Society Conference that's going to be held in Raleigh, North Carolina in 2017, 1 in 35 that were submitted by African American speakers was approved. 1. And to just make sure that I clarify how many people submitted these 35 presentations, that was between 5 people. So if you submitted presentations and you were of African American descent, based on the information I have for the folks that I know that reached out to me, you had less than a 3% chance of your presentation getting approved. And the comment is keep applying.
Yeah,
why would we?
Yeah.
When you only have a 3% chance? Why would we, if only one of us out of 5 people is being given the opportunity, and the one person that did get the opportunity, their presentation that was approved was for African American genealogy? I will tell you that the vast majority of these 35 presentations were not on African American genealogy.
That addresses then another issue right there. But yeah.
Well, and Nika, and the keep on applying, and I commented because there was a few people that I was one of them that said keep applying, and then I came back and I retracted that because I'm a big motivator. I want you to do well. I want to do well. I want everybody to do well. And I retracted that publicly on Facebook in a response to someone that said keep applying. Well, a few people did. And I used to say that all the time, just keep applying, keep applying. I can't do that anymore because exactly of the data that I'm seeing and now learning even more of, and I'm one of them that continually gets rejected. And so, and again, skills, methodology, experience. I've done genealogy almost over 30 years. I've got significant successes with my tree and helping others with their tree. But I can't tell people to keep applying anymore. I think the message is you're not wanted.
Well, and that's the other piece that I'll add on to this is that out of those 5 speakers that submitted 35 talks, there was more than 100 years of combined experience between those people.
Now, see, that's shameful at one point. I'm sorry.
Not
that
10 years.
That hurt.
100 years.
Hurt. Yeah. So again, are we valued? And I think it's even I think it's also not just people of color. I think there is a realm of the same presenters year after year after year. So I don't want to just make the public, because I know people are listening and tuning in, talking and whatever, but there's also a group of our white cousins, genie buddies, whatever, that are also not getting that chance, because you got the old regime that holds some of these places, and you see the same faces all the time. So newer people coming on with experience, new skills, things to share, don't get that opportunity based on those stats. And that's something I think needs to be relooked at and opened up. You know, I'm not telling somebody how to run their business or anything like that, but give an opportunity to others, because we can do it everywhere else, state and local. But, you know, and we have just as much to share. I have just as much skills as anybody on this panel. And we'll learn from each of you and consider everybody a mentor. So I think that's a chance for people to relook at what they're submitting and where they're submitting.
Yeah, that's one of the things that I talked about in the blog post was go where you're wanted, go where you're going to grow, go where people are going to support you in what you're trying to do. There's no need to keep banging your head up against the same wall. And, you know, one of the things that I'll also share is, you know, some societies are going to read, you know, what I wrote, read what Genealogy Jen wrote, you know, a number of different ways that you could advance the diversity and inclusion in your society. And that's all good and well. But here's one thing that I want to add as a caveat to that. It's great if your society, the board of directors, whoever your leadership is, decides that they want to pursue diversity and inclusion. That's wonderful. But your organization needs to do the work. You, as an organization, don't go to a group of people of color and tell them, help us get this, bring in more people like you, do X, Y, Z. No, what that says to a person of color is that it's their responsibility to change your culture. And that's not what their job is. If your group really, truly believes in inclusion, diversity, that the genealogy is for everyone, you're going to make sure that you take the time to go through your policies, your procedures, anything that could adversely affect anyone. As simple as if you still have indexes for old censuses that say whites only on them on the shelves of your library, having enough sense to remove that, because that could be seen as offensive to somebody. That shouldn't be, you shouldn't appoint a special committee for people of color and have it all be people of color and have them be the work group that does everything. No, that looks lazy and sloppy. I'm just going to give that to you for free. So
I'll pay for that.
But the point I'm making is it's about everybody. And if it's really about everyone, and if it's really about inclusion, and if it's really about diversity, you're not going to try to push it off on other people to do the work for you. You're going to do the work. I hate to make it quiet, but that's
why I'm
Mic
speaking up, because
drop.
nobody else is saying anything. Come to the table with an open mind and don't tell me what I need to be trained on, because I have the skills coming to the table. So I want everybody to come to the table. If they're looking to make change, then I'm equal at the table.
Yeah, you are equal at the table. Well,
yeah.
and that's the thing. Jen had amazing points.
Yes.
That's what you're supposed to do. But I can see, and I've had experiences with other organizations who were trying, not even related to genealogy. Right. I've had other organizations who wanted to increase diversity, bring in a group of people of color, and then make them the work group to change.
Yes,
their organization. And that's not how it works.
No.
And that's not how it sticks. And that's not how it's lasting. You as an organization have to, that's a whole separate other process. If you bring them in for feedback and vetting and all the other, that's different. But expecting your African-American research group to add more diversity to your organization, asking them in particular to do it, no, that's not it. It has to come down from the leadership. And I will just add, there's a few comments in the chat. Definitely reaching in and reaching out. It takes both sides. You know, the society has to reach out and the other people have to reach hands back in. But you've got to have people there to reach out to. If you don't advertise, if you don't go into spaces that people of color are in, how do you expect for them to come to you?
When, you know, a good comment that a lot of times for various conferences is that the people of color are not attending the conferences. And when I've went to certain conferences, oh yeah, I'm counting who's there, who I see. I'm counting because it doesn't matter if I'm doing a presentation on African American genealogy or whatever, you know, because I don't always do that. I do it on methods and strategies.
Yeah.
And I don't always see, depending on how big the conference typically is, there's just a handful that come. And so there's more there, but if you don't see anything that's going to help you within your research, why would you go? And, you know, just like in the public education, there was a time that Black children or children of color only saw white teachers. They didn't always see people of color teachers. And I think this is a teaching moment for all of us. We got to have that diversity to teach. And not all whites can teach on people of color. Not all Blacks could teach on people of color. I think it's all of us coming together and teaching and just, you know, I'm not going to say trying to get along as words from Rodney King. I'm just saying you got to come with the willingness to do this. And don't slap me down thinking you got to teach me something to come up to your level, because I am at your level and appreciate the opportunity to share something that you might not know that will enhance your research. And I always invite people that aren't of my color. Well, that's not a good thing to say.
I was about to say, because you about as light as chicken.
But wait a minute, and don't talk about the DNA. We're not
about to say
going
you
there.
and
No.
Tony,
But what I'm
Tony might be
saying
having the
is,
same
I
foundation.
would encourage people that are not Latino or African to sit into our sessions.
Yes.
Because they will learn different skills and outside the box that they are traditionally taught in continually. And I know that because I've been in both of them, and that's why I come up with the so what. It's just like GPS, but let me tell you what, it's a drill, you're doing it, and things are coming out of it. Because they're not teaching but one tunnel of to do things, where we're looking at various tunnels and trying to bring it all together. So
one thing I'll also add is, you know, all of us, especially those who are in the speaking arena, we all speak on a number of different topics, not just African American research. And I think that's, yeah, so what? You know, and so that's something that needs to be said. And a comment from the chat room, and this is totally apropos, is you don't go where you're not wanted.
Correct.
And if, you know, you look at conference materials and they're trying to be diverse, but their population hasn't quite caught up yet, then there has to be a concerted effort put out to recruit those people to come and to make them feel like they're wanted.
Yeah.
You know, and one of the easiest ways to make a person of color not show up is when they see your conference materials and all the presenters don't look like them.
Yes. Yeah.
That's the quickest way to make sure that they don't come.
I think also that sometimes now, when you asked about the field itself maybe not being respected, it's very interesting because I think that sometimes maybe there is a little bit of disrespect for the topic of African American genealogy, because certainly I specialize in Civil War as one of my areas of interest, and not only the United States colored troops. I do research others. And, but a lot of times if I have a workshop that I may be submitting a proposal to an organization to speak on Civil War, it might be assumed that, oh, well, we already have someone else talking about U.S. colored troops, so I might not get into that pile to look at. But I think there's a certain degree of expertise that has to be recognized that many of us have. And I know that there have been events in the Midwest when people are talking about land records and homestead records. I'm sorry, if you don't know what Bernice can tell you about homesteaders and homestead records, you are missing something very, very significant. I can give a personal example. Of course, many people know that Native American is one of the areas that I research. There are probably 3 people who've studied Native American records, particularly out of Indian Territory or the Twin Territories of Oklahoma, as much as I. There are probably 2 others that have gone and immersed themselves in it, who are just as verbose when it comes to those records. Yet I know from experience, having submitted, that suddenly, okay, well, you don't have to accept me, but I know that somebody living in Western Tennessee who knows about those records is going to be selected, or I have a colleague in Northern California who knows those records. But no, they're not accepted. And here's someone else who's going to give a very sanitized version of the same topic, yet at least 3 of those individuals I can point out are published and have really gone in depth with those. Really, are they truly considered equal to? Probably not. And that's unfortunate because, again, there's that concept of, oh, well, maybe you could only talk about that. But someone less skilled and less aware of how extensive some of those records can be, they never be considered. Again, well, keep applying. And as I think Bernice or someone said here in the chat, it's like telling someone to keep drinking water out of the colored water fountain. And wow, it does make one think. And
yes, there's a couple comments. Jen is in here. There's not an edge left because she keeps making comments in the chat room. She says a lot of the conferences are not being promoted to people of color. If the organizers and members only have white friends, that's who they're going to share the information about with regard to the conference.
That's interesting.
But I think it is a point of recognition. When I see people talking about their favorite, people online, and they'll mention their favorite podcasters, I share those favorite podcasters, but I would never miss Bernice's show. But I don't see her name mentioned there. And, really, okay.
Aren't you the only one that speaks at the Smithsonian on the blended families?
Yes. Yeah, I'm the only genealogist of any color.
Exactly. I mean, look at that right there.
But again, I think it's a matter of really, we can have qualifications that stretch from here to the Chesapeake Bay, but is it really considered not enough? What is that perception that one is not prepared, or one is not, well, I don't know what the word is, because my concern would be, I wish others who are among those NGS speakers would be coming to OGS this week. I would love to see some of those folks would be coming to Atlanta this week. But I don't necessarily see them tweeted about or mentioned at all. I would like to see some of the same people who go to Grip It and who go to IGHR to say, hey, maybe I should be going to Maggie, or maybe I should be taking a look at something else at IBGS. We're going to go to Grip. We're going to go to IGHR.
But they're not coming to us.
Why is that?
I think someone commented part of it is fear. I think that
nice folks.
Well, yeah, but you got to think about, hold on. Think about the climate we're in our country right now.
Yeah, chaos.
Where, discourse of a racial nature is very volatile.
Yeah.
And even before that, because this definitely predates, the current era that we're in right now. But I think, especially when you're talking about topics about slavery or topics like slavery, I think there's a perception that the blow of dealing with chattel slavery is softened when the person doesn't have the personal experience of knowing that there are branches of their family that just go and you don't know where they go. You just only have names past a certain point. You know, there's a little bit more. You, as I mentioned it to James earlier, when he had a little bass in his voice when he was getting at me about being a Y chromosome, right? Yeah, see how you just kind of like, right? There's a little bit more in that when a person knows that they have that experience versus someone who is talking about a concept or a topic. And so when we're saying things like, yes, there's an inventory and the slaves were bequeathed to this person or that person, you would say that. But the color we would add in there is, and she was pregnant. She was 6 months, had to be 6 months pregnant with her next child. And that next child was my ancestor who eventually was sold off from their mother and did not know who she was. And yet it's not on paper in some courthouse. That was oral history that was passed down to me. Mm-hmm. See the difference in those two stories? So some folks, I think, just can't handle that raw nature. And we're not going to come in there like reparations. No, we don't do that. But
I was going to. And give me those names.
I was going to.
I'm not asking nobody for some money, but I am asking
anything.
people to be fair.
Yeah, but
cash rules everything around me.
Fairness. Yeah, stop it. Over here quoting Wu-Tang Clan. I'm gonna.
I think some of this though is a lot older. It has a lot of roots. I mean, you got to look at the beginnings of genealogy, and you got to look at that close relationship to eugenics around 1900, and you got to think about why. Why are we regarded as less than? Yeah. You know, why is it you don't want to talk about people who don't have resources or poor people when you're doing genealogy? Or why is it always kings or the mayor? Or so what about all these other folks? You know, so I think there's an older weight to that hasn't been dropped yet. And I think that's starting to break up. But and I don't know that people are really looking at that right now. Well, they're not looking at it as intensely as they should. That history, that older, genealogy of genealogy, say.
Yes, we're gonna a few last comments before we wrap up, because here we are almost 45 minutes over talking.
Well, I like what Ellen said, the genealogy of genealogy. I think that's really important. But I would also say that I think that there has to be a discussion around, like you said, the politics of family history. Okay, Tony and I have been talking a lot over the past few weeks about a gentleman that I've been trying to research for some time, and have been really having some trouble with. And as she and I were trading information about him or whatever, I said, well, hey, I gave her all this information, and then I said, hey, I have a picture of him. His last name was he was a Drayton, right? His name was Paul Drayton. He's big in my favorite organization, right? And I was trying to research him for quite some time. And Tony, you've been kind of quiet tonight, so I want you to tell them, when I sent you that picture of Paul Drayton, what did you say to me?
I said he's Drayton through and through.
Wow.
But he's black.
Yes. I mean, he looks like his reputed father. I'll say that.
Yeah, I mean, she sent me pictures of people living today that look like this black man that I had a picture of who died in like 1852.
Yes.
Okay?
Yeah.
So,
yes.
And then we start. I'm not going to put too much out there, but we start talking about property transactions and things. And Tony was saying she didn't know why certain things happened, and then the existence of this man that she didn't know about. She said, "Wait, this might explain some things." When you talk about family historians, especially with big names like that or big plantations and stuff, I mean, stuff gets really, really, really complicated sometimes. Mm-hmm. And that's the stuff that I think that's a conversation I think that America has not had, but I think that genealogy really is on the cutting edge of doing, but we haven't done it yet. And I think that we really should be having those conversations, not only because I know we do that on a micro level inside our individual families, but as a community, as a genealogy community, are we really having that kind of a conversation where we're getting into that?
Good point.
I don't know. We are.
I'm glad you mentioned the politics of family history and the politics of what we do. We know that many of us for some time were not necessarily welcomed into a community when what was it, back in 90 whatever, when James Walker tried to join a genealogical organization. Mm-hmm. And we know that part, but we also know that there is sometimes that urge to okay, let's judge. Let's see if this person's going to, here's our ruler, and let's now take, interesting research, Mr. So-and-so. Let's see if if our ruler fits what we're going to measure. And, but hey, what does that exactly mean? Again, it's coming from a concept of supremacy. And it's hard for, I know, individuals to let go of that concept of supremacy. I think one of the solutions was, hey, well, maybe we can mentor these individuals who want to speak. I think 3 or 4 years ago, when there was a similar dialogue, something said, well, maybe speakers should submit videos on what they can do and we can take a look. Again, that was judging to see if they measured something that was considered superior. And no, I'm coming with credentials, and my skill set is good. As I said, I learn from everyone on this panel. I know if there's anything in the Low Country, I know I'm going to call Tony and ask questions. And I know that there's certain things on Virginia or free registers, free Negro registers, that I'm going to ask certain questions of Shelley. I know I'm going to ask some things on Franklin County, North Carolina, to Renata. And I know that there's certain things even about publishing, writing, that I'm going to be asking Nika. I could just go on and on and on and write down the list. And I know if it's anything to do with the Benevolent Society, James Morgan III, where are you? And the thing is that not just the fact that XYZ individuals know a few little details. It's not just the fact that they know a few details. They have a body of knowledge that would benefit everyone. The Freedmen's Bureau records, even though unfortunately it was been presented as a Black record set, in my part of the country, on the Western frontier, Arkansas, Fort Smith Field Office, a majority of the recipients of rations were white and Cherokee. And, it's a record set that reflects the entire population. Now, everybody doesn't know that. Everyone, of course, doesn't use the records. People are just beginning to discover them a bit more. But it's a record set that we can all benefit from. But until you hear it from someone who doesn't look like me is when you're going to accept it. But then that's coming again from the fact that the messenger, is coming from a superior platform. Really?
Well, let me guide the conversation a little bit, just so we can close on out. What do you see?
Love it. I love it.
Children's books.
Right? It's a baby bookshelf with books just shoved in there. Don't judge his shoving technique. We're working on putting them back in the right places, and so they stand upright. But there's a reason why I share this, because in 2 months my son is going to be 2 years old, and had he been born maybe 150 years ago plus, all of what you see could have gotten me killed.
Yeah.
And that's not an exaggeration, because educating him and educating myself was considered illegal. And because of that, the history that he has, some of it is only oral, because there was no one who was literate to be able to write it down. So the only way that they could pass information from one person to another was to hear it, was through the verbal word. And in addition to us having these books, as people in the chat room are alluding to, and you're absolutely right, having the possession of the book, being caught knowing how to read, being caught teaching other people how to read, this was a death sentence, literally sitting in my house. And I bring this up for a very important reason. And songs, absolutely. Singing songs, I mean, there's a number of things. Granted, my family's from Louisiana, so we had the benefit of Congo Square in the New Orleans area, where they actually allowed you to go out and sing and drum in those areas, but that was unique. I digress. But the reason why I bring this up is, and this is just a quote that I'm going to share, and I'm not indicting anybody, but I'm sharing this just for context as to why I show this bookshelf in ways that I think that indirectly, we as people of color have been somewhat marginalized when it comes to how we share and tell our stories. Yet Haley's chains were self-made. He had bound himself to the burden of proving an oral tradition, every holy word of it. His crusade was destined for failure.
Whoa. Can you show that again?
Sure. Haley in this reference is
Oh,
Alex
okay.
Haley.
Self-made?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
Got it. 1984. Interesting.
Oh,
That
This
hurts.
is the reason why I bring this up is because in addition to that Washington Post article, if you haven't read it, go back to the blog post that I made regarding James Dent Walker and him being marginalized from membership in the National Genealogical Society in 1960. And you fast forward 24 years later, and a statement like this is made in their quarterly journal. In some ways, all we have is our oral history. That's it. And if someone who appears to be an expert comes through and says that that's not important, or that we're destined for failure, to pay attention to it, or to use it as a guideline, or as a guiding principle, or as that lighthouse in the dark, what does that tell? What does that tell us now?
Same thing we just talked about the last 30 minutes. Not being wanted, not being equal, the myths and things like that. And that's unfortunate, and very unfortunate. And but I hate to sit here at 64 years old and say I'm not surprised. That's what I hate even more, to say that's a common, that's pretty much common overall, and I'm still seeing it and hearing it and witnessing that at my age, you know. And some things, and again, I hate saying this, some things won't change because they're so deep rooted, especially in this country. So, and I'm sorry to see that. So, and I did read your article.
Well, I
appreciate that.
throw that out there, not as an indictment, but just really as a,
That's
really just to remind people of the foundation that our societies and our organizations are sitting on, and the fact that it's going to take some real work to undo some of the things that were done. And it may have not been done out of malice. I don't think anybody intentionally did certain things or said certain things. But when it's out there, and here I was 4 years old when this was written, and now I'm 37 and I can pull that up and still read it. What does that say to somebody who's like me that's doing research? So I'm just putting that out there, food for thought. I placed the links inside the chat room if you're curious as to where I got these things, because they're publicly available. I didn't have to search very far for them. But I just want to leave us on that note, because I really want us to consider that this is not just a new phenomenon. This is not just about NGS for 2017. This is not just about speakers. This is not just about the topics they present. This is about genealogy as a whole, and its lack of diversity and its lack of inclusion. And the fact that the foundation is that. All the rest of these things are symptomatic.
Mm-hmm.
They're leaves on the tree of a much larger tree. We got to get to the branches and the root of the issue. So it's hard to smile after that, but you know what? I always know there's a light at the end of the tunnel. And the fact that we're even having a conversation about it and that it's not hidden on a website is powerful. And that's what I have to take with that. So